Hello, Amador County. My name is Vinny Silva, clinical therapist trainee here at Nexus Youth and Family Services. Uh, Super glad to be here for yet another wellness workshop presentation for our community and anybody that could be visiting us online from wherever you are. This month, we're going to be talking about self-care. We're going to try to rethink self-care. And as you can see on one of our images right at the top, we have self-care isn't selfish, right? This is a main message that I want us to take home as we watch through the presentation. But with that being said, there's actually a couple categories that I wanted to break down for us to better understand what self-care is and what does it look like in practice. So we're gonna go over four different components. We're gonna begin by defining self-care. What are some potential risks when we decide to make self-care secondary and not one of the priorities that we have in our day-to-day lives? Some misconceptions, I think, especially now in this day and age where the language, I think we have the accurate language to describe a lot of things when it comes to mental health, but maybe it's used inappropriately or misused in the wrong context. So we're going to break that down. And we're going to talk about this concept of how self-care rewires the brain in ways that is extremely beneficial for us. So I want to first define self-care by saying self-care can be best defined as ensuring a balance between emotional, physical, and social needs. And this second part is extremely important. That allows room for a progress-oriented approach rather than result-oriented. And some of y'all may have heard me use this type of language, or maybe some of the other workshop videos that I've presented. I think it's important that we take progress-oriented approach over result-oriented. Progress-oriented just means we're falling in love with the journey. We're falling in love with the little steps that we are taking when it comes to self-care. This includes our thoughts, this includes our social interaction, and just the little steps on how we're moving forward. Rather than result oriented, I think a lot of times we can criticize ourselves and shame ourselves to the point that it's not really motivating us and moving forward. Rather, we're stagnating, and because we're not seeing ourselves move as quickly as maybe our counterparts, we stay stuck, we feel stuck, and then we give up completely on the self-care concept. And I see this happen often with parents as well. So what is self-care? I wanted to begin with it's very intentional. We're taking the time out of our day to do something that's going to promote our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. And I include spiritual in there because spirituality can look different for all of us. It doesn't have to necessarily just be in a religious context. But what am I doing that's allowing myself to get my cup full? And I think self-care also goes beyond indulgences. Way too many times we have an image out there, self-care, of binge watching Netflix, eating ice cream. I'm going to, I see even some of the teens, I'm going to go ahead and just drink the night away because this is what I need to relieve some stress. Or I'm going to eat that bag of Doritos so I'm completely full and I'm calling that self-care. But that's not balance, right? It's kind of pushing us towards a part of our life that's making it swing to more unhealthy coping skills, and that's something we're trying to avoid. Self-care keeps us right on track. Self-care, and a lot of us can hear this, self-care includes activities like setting boundaries. It's interesting, the way we communicate with people and the ways that we want to progress and move forward on how we treat ourselves and how we carry ourselves is an act of self-care. So if for our people pleasers out there, and as a you know, as a people pleaser, that's growing out of his shell more and more. When I'm beginning to set boundaries and I'm beginning to tell people this is what's within my capacity, and I think what you're asking of me is going beyond my capacity, what I can offer at this moment in time, that's self-care. I'm validating what I can offer, and I'm keeping it honest and truthful. And so that is a form of self-care too, right? Giving respect of where we're at in our day-to-day lives. Practicing mindfulness. This isn't just meditation and kumbaya. Mindfulness is just being connected to the present. So we're staying current with the emotions that we feel at this moment in time. We feel connected with our social connections. We're present in our work, in our profession, in our families to the best of our capacity. Notice I'm not saying perfect, just the best of our capacity. Maintaining physical health. And this doesn't just have to be an intense exercise and routine. It could be being one with nature. It could be taking walks. It could be walking with friends, right? Making it a social and a physical health interaction, and seeking help when needed. Am I taking the time to lean on those that I trust around me and ask for help? to get something in my life done, right? So a prime example I could also give of self-care is many people could be maybe a little bit behind on debt, but I think instead of taking practical progress-oriented steps towards removing that debt so that burden isn't there, right? What's within their capacity, I know financial situations change. A lot of us will rather choose distractions. So that's not self-care. Right now we're just indulging to completely escape what we're feeling. And self-care can be practical where it's, man, I was able to pay 30 bucks of that debt, 100 bucks of that debt. And it doesn't look much right now, but thinking progress oriented, I'm doing something that's helping myself and my family to move out of that debt. So I want us to start looking at self-care in that way. Core elements, and I like to break it down in four different concepts, right? There's the emotional element, physical, mental, and social element of self-care. So a lot of times I think a lot of people will focus on the emotional part when it comes to mental health and self-care, but again, it's balance, right? Where in these four categories am I treating myself well, and what have I been neglecting? And we'll see often a lot of them intersect, right? Because I've been neglecting my physical health, it's also affected my mental health, right? Or because I've been neglecting my emotional, it's also affecting the way that I show up in my social interactions, and my relationships aren't as cohesive as it once was. All of this is intertwined, and I would add spiritual on there as well. For a lot of us, thinking beyond just the present moment and the day to day, and being tapped into something bigger than us, a purpose, a motivation, a spiritual concept, that could be neglected and affect our self-care. So these are places to reflect, where in this can I start paying attention a little bit more? And so some examples for emotional is maybe journaling, or maybe I'm making music, I'm doing poetry, I'm going to therapy, or I'm cultivating a gratitude journal, creating affirmations. Maybe I am getting exercise, or maybe, I'm not at the exercise point, but I'm taking care of my sleep. I'm getting more balanced nutrition, and it's a little bit better than it was yesterday. That's all we need to focus on, right? And mental, learning new skills, or self-reflecting, creative outlets, and obviously building supportive relationships, saying no when necessary, protecting ourselves, but also protecting those around us that we care about. So a lot of us will know self-care includes increased stress, burnout, and physical illness. Maybe we're emotionally withdrawing, and our productivity is decreasing, not only professionally but in our family relationships. There's a strain in our relationships, a reduced overall quality of life. We're just not feeling well. Our appetite is gone. Our sleeping is gone. Our energy is low. We are leaning on unhealthy coping skills, and so that's kind of taking its toll after a while, and we're neglecting actually confronting some of the things that are getting to us. And obviously this can cause a sense of isolation and a risk of suicidal ideation. Mind you, neglected self-care can also look like I'm overindulging not only on hobbies, but I'm overindulging on my professional life. So I know often for men in particular, there are times where we see them come in and they are working 50, 60-hour weeks, and you're starting to notice that that's their way of dealing with the neglect of their self-care. So they'll rather put their full focus on something that deviates their attention from all that. And this could also be applicable to women, but I've seen often more so for men. So mind you, burnout and stress doesn't just look like social withdrawal or tears, right? Or breaking down and crying. It can also feel very monotone, right? I'm just going through the motion. I'm just showing up. I'm being obsessed with a little bit too much in the area of my life, and it's neglecting everything else around me. All telltale signs that we're neglecting that self-care. So misconceptions about self-care. Self-care is not selfish, it's necessary for sustainability. Obviously everything there's a balance, but I really want this perception that if I choose to work on myself, right? And again, I don't mean this at the cost of our loved ones. I mean, man, let me give myself an hour or two that allows me to feel reconnected. What are some obligations that I need to get done so that that's a little bit lighter on my plate? And maybe I can even ask those around me for assistance, right? That's not being selfish. That's necessary so that you can be sustainable in the long term, right? It's not always expensive or time consuming. So I think a lot of times when it comes to self-care, We get this idea that we have to swim in the ocean and in the lakes for 2 hours, and the sun needs to be beaming on our faces, and we need a motivational quote on an Instagram story to say that we're feeling reconnected again. It could be very simplistic. It could be something as simple as going back to family rituals and traditions. What were some things that I used to enjoy that I stopped over the last 2 years? What books haven't I done? I've seen some young men go back to hunting and they weren't hunting for over 2 years or 3 years, and now they're going back. They went back to fishing because it was an area that allowed them to stay a little bit more rooted. People took some time to be self-aware and said, wow, I'm neglecting my studies. I'm neglecting my work. I'm not prioritizing it as much. Maybe I'm investing too much in my relationships. And then I've noticed I'm not putting as much energy as I should have in my personal career. And now I feel like things are misbalanced. And I need to go back to that routine, building that routine. What does it look like? I'm building those small steps. So it's not necessarily expensive, right, doing that. Does it take time? Sure. But those are little things that we build on so that our self-care is not uh, neglected. And so self-care isn't one size fits all. It's deeply personal. Some of us are going to feel more of a liking to one particular thing over another. Some of us might not like journaling. And actually, it's funny. I went to a retreat, and what I learned was actually recording your thoughts. And I prefer that a million times more than journaling, because anytime I wanted to go back and just see how much I've grown, I can hear back in audio. And it also forced me to overcome some of the fears I have of hearing my own voice. So that was a way of self-care, right? Where I could go back and be like, wow, I've actually made a decent amount of progress in just 30 days, 15 days, 2 weeks, right? 6 months, 1 year, right? I look back and I'm like, I think a lot different. Form of self-care. Retail therapy is not it. I want us to kind of get out of this habit that me going shopping for 6, 8 hours, that is the definition of self-care. Shopping could be a component because maybe we're hanging out with friends and maybe we're going outside, out of the house, and we're going to places. But buying the material thing in and of itself is not what's bringing us home. It's the same thing with video games. I think there's a social component of video games that's great for us to feel connected, right? There's a purpose, there's a goal, there's a challenge that we're completing. But if I go all in and it's neglecting my food, my sleep, my family time, it's going beyond that boundary of self-care, right? So I think self-care has grown in its misunderstanding over the years because we see social media glamorizing aesthetics over authenticity, right? It doesn't show the journey. It only shows results. Shows the guy or the woman at the beach with her foot kicked up. I worked 60 hours this week and now I get 2 days of self-rest. And we're calling that the epitome of self-care, when self-care is very gradual and maybe looks small, comes in small increments, right? I came back from work today and I had a 10-hour shift, but I took 10 minutes and I journaled. Or I took 8 minutes and I decided to check in with my family before I decided to cook, right? Or this time when I got home with my family, I told them to all put their phones away. We were going to eat and play board games for 30 minutes, right? Small, practical steps, little moments. Capitalistic influences, I think, promote consumer-driven solutions. So it's always geared towards this idea that I got to spend money, it's got to look pretty, it's got to be rich, it's got to be wealthy for it to be defined as self-care. Vacations doesn't just have to be to the Bahamas, or Jamaica or Colombia or Europe. Vacations could look just as simple as me going on a 2-hour trip to Monterey, or we're taking a 1-hour trip to visit the mall in the local area. But I'm doing it with family and friends that I love, right? And so due to a lack of awareness of deeper emotional and mental health needs, I think we misunderstand self-care all the more. Because I'm not understanding myself, I get more frustrated, I get more angry, and I continue to downgrade myself to the point of saying I don't need this because we're frustrated and maybe we're not yet aware of what's actually really bothering us beneath the surface. So we want to rewire that brain for self-compassion, build new pathways, and like I said earlier, mindfulness, practice being present without judgment. Can I take 5 minutes to where my thoughts are not judging or critiquing myself or others? I'm merely being. I'm merely being a part of the experience. Gratitude. Are there moments that I can be fully thankful for the small things that's occurring? Self-reflection. Do I have a mindset where I can reframe my failures instead of my failures defining me? Because those are two separate ways of thinking, right? So a lot of people get frustrated when we say, even in therapeutic circles, we have to readjust our thoughts. Well, it's just our thoughts, Vinny, and you're just basically saying I got to think myself to happiness. Not necessarily. What I'm saying is not only do I have to do the physical action of self-care, but my mental also has to follow. Because if I'm criticizing myself and I'm doing these little self-care activities, it can get kind of redundant, right? It's almost canceling each other out because I'm doing something that's supposed to make me feel good, but then I leave and my thought patterns are still remaining the same and I'm not actively challenging them, right? I'm not reframing them to allow progress-oriented approach. Positive reinforcement. Can I reward myself with small acts of self-care, right? So rewiring the brain and the pathways of thought process is essential. And I want us to integrate self-compassion in our day-to-day lives. And I know, but particularly talking to the youth, especially young males, I talk about this concept of affirmations and they're like cringe. But we don't have to just say I'm worthy of care and rest and, I feel beautiful. Maybe it's I'm a leader, right? I'm creating a journey that's going to make me feel more like the leader that I want to be, or like the man or the woman that I want to be. I want to step forward in my purpose and my motivation. Cater the affirmations to your language, what you feel comfortable with. It doesn't just have to be what I call the kumbaya statements, right? Because not everybody relates to that. Schedule self-care in your routine. This could be just as small as making the bed, right? I'm eating breakfast, right? What are those 5-10 minutes I can do that can really just be for me? Simplify, start small. And I always tell clients when they come in, when we talk about this concept of self-care, don't overindulge or go to the point of, I'm going to take 1-2 hours every single day to do this self-care. Build it up gradually. We're working out our muscles. We're working out our emotional and mental capacity to handle self-care into our routine. So build it up in increments and seek support. Who else do you have around you that's participating in this journey and wants to improve their own self-care habits and is willing to support and encourage you? That's also essential. So, and like I've said before, consider emotional, physical, mental, social, and I'll add a fifth, spiritual. Which areas of these is needed for us for self-care in my own life. And so start small and start today, right? It's a continuous process of self-awareness and self-conceptions and self-compassion. And misconceptions can be reframed by focusing on authenticity over aesthetics. It's not about me posting on the gram. It's about me being present with my journey and my social circle, right? Take ownership of who it is. And if social media is part of you sharing that in a way that doesn't allow for space for you to feel criticized or feel shame or feel like you're comparing to others, then feel the journey, right? Be a part of that. But embrace it just wholeheartedly as your own, right? And not steering to comparing towards others. And we're aiming for balance. That's all we're doing. We're trying to balance out these 4 areas. So some resources I think for women that could work well is Self-Love, a workbook for women, Releasing Self-Doubt, Building Self-Compassion, Embracing Who You Are by Megan Logan. She is a licensed clinical social worker. Mindful Self-Compassion for Burnout, Tools to Help You Heal and Recharge When You're Run Out by Stress. This is by Christine Neff and Christopher Germer. Both of them are doctorate therapists who are given this great insightful book on how to work and navigate with stress. And for men, Terrence Real has this phenomenal book. I don't want to talk about it, Overcoming the Secret Legacy of Male Depression, trying to combat that silence that's taking control of a lot of young men out there and how to challenge and overcome that. And I really like this podcast, Not Quite Zen by Tony Hardiman. I think he breaks it down in a practical, familiar way that feels very conversational that young men can relate to, and how the journey of taking care of themselves has been a progress-oriented one and not a result-oriented one. And so here's some additional resources that I would encourage you guys to take a pause and take a look. Um, and please, if you have a chance, scan this QR code so you can provide a survey and some feedback on this wellness workshop. And with that, I greatly appreciate your guys' patience. I hope there was something that was a reminder for you, and I hope you guys have a happy holiday. Please take care of yourselves, let it be in small steps, and start today. Thank you.